here is Emily Dickinson, and she is kind of one of these mythic figures. And let me tell you, I think she's one of the greatest poets ever, and seriously, certainly in the top 5 ever. And that's just me. I don't have any qualitative or quantitative, evidence right now, but that's just my view of it. I think she's definitely she's definitely my favorite female poet without question. And just the brilliance of her poetry is mind numbing, to coin a phrase that we'll talk about in just a minute. Okay, so there she is. That's the most common image of her. And let me tell you a little bit about her. She lived in Amherst, not Concord. And this is part of the reason some people may tend to categorize her as a transcendentalist, but she was not. I call them late romantics, her and Whitman. I call them late romantics. And I think that's not a hugely prevalent thing, but that's what I call them. She's not a transcendentalist. In fact, Emerson came to her house and stayed there. He stayed at the Evergreens next door, and she didn't go see him. She said, I want the Emerson of my mind to be the one that I remember, not the real one. Okay, so here's her house in Amherst, Massachusetts. Now, Amherst is quite a ways from Concord, which is close to Boston. Concord is close to Boston, not Amherst. This is the homestead. This is the main building. And next door, they built another house for Emily's brother, which was Austin. And that is called the Evergreens next door. And the Evergreens looks like this. So Emily Dickinson was indeed a recluse, but it's not what you think. I think that it is just, there's a lot of caveats that go into that. Certainly for the last part of her life, she did not leave the compound for decades. I don't know the exact number, but a long, long time. She stayed there. She was never married. And long ago, when I first started kind of studying Emily Dickinson, I thought to myself, why would that she must have been agoraphobic or something? I don't think that's the case at all. The case is that she was from one of the highest, most affluent families in Amherst. And so there was just not a whole lot of reason to leave. She was never married, and the tendency or the normal thing to do for women who were not married at that time were to stay at home with their parents. So both her and Lavidia, her sister, did not get married, and so they both stayed home. And I mean, she had servants not servants in the way of slavery, but servants, just people who work for them, there to do most things for her. And so why leave, right? There's just not really any reason to leave. And she really stayed there. Now, next door to her house, she had a garden. And let me back up. This is her bedroom. And I walked into this bedroom, because when I took a tour of her house, I walked into this bedroom. And let me tell you right here that this dresser right here, this was her dresser, and this was her writing table. When I walked into this bedroom, it was like walking into a holy place for me anyway. And I'm going to tell you, the story goes differently in different places, but I'm going to tell you the way they told me when I went to her house there. It goes like this. She wrote a bunch of poems, and when I'll talk about publication in a moment, but hardly any were published during her lifetime, hardly any. And in fact, the ones that were edited, and that she took it very, very seriously. And so she felt like she at the end of her life, she had compiled these books of poetry called fascicles. And those fascicles were put in this drawer right here. And they were there when she died. And there was a note saying, burn all of my poetry and my correspondence. Well, thank God they didn't. Thank God they didn't. This is her. I'm going to return to this. I promise. This is her basket, and she would lower baked goods down to the kids below. A lot of times with poems, from her window there. She was known for these dresses, or white dresses there. One of her white dresses is in the picture there. Now next door, she had a wonderful garden. This is just some strange kid that wandered into but she had a wonderful garden and orchard. They had all kinds of fruit bearing, all kinds of stuff. Now, Emily Dickinson was a serious gardener, like serious. And so if you're interested in that kind of thing, you can track her gardening through her poetry. They have books about she was also an avid bird watcher or a bird, so her birds show up in her poems. She's very, very much in tune with nature. Now here's her grave. I couldn't help it. I just couldn't help it. I couldn't help it. Okay, she lived in Amherst, and Amherst College, believe it or not, was a Calvinist alternative to Harvard, which was liberal, right? And so remember, Calvinism is like the doctrine of the elect. This is like the model for Puritanism. And so, but she only went to school just a brief moment of her life, really, 1840 to 1846. And then she went to boarding school at Mount Holyoke Female Cemetery, might as well be seminary. And at this Mount Holyoke Female Seminary School, this was Calvinist as well. So they had this tendency to corner the students and say, profess your faith. And they had three options. They had professed faith, hope, and no hope. Emily Dickinson was always and forever a no hope. She's no hope. I think it's hilarious. I mean, she was certainly not a Christian, and she professed it. She called herself one of the lingering bad ones. And so you'll see that she is very much, in the transcendentalist sense, she's very much a worshiper of nature. Yes, indeed, she is. And so I think she took it to a better level than the transcendentalists, a different level, a more spiritual level. The transcendentalists seem to want to force it. Nature is God, but she just infused herself with it, if you will. She had a great friend named Susan Gilbreth, and she most likely fell in love with a few people in her life, although she was never married. One or more married men. There was a man named Benjamin Newton, which was a law clerk at her father's office. And by the way, if you have seen any of the Apple series Dickinson, erase it from your mind, excise it from your life and the universe as it is, because that is not, it is an abomination before man and God. I tell you what, it's terrible. It's horrible. I mean, it's not anywhere in the universe of being true. So it's very disappointing to see that. In any event, she maybe fell in love with her friend Susan Gilbreth. I mean, but and we just don't know. But in the 300 letters she sent to Susan, there's a lot in there that shows even beyond a sexual relationship, a very, very spiritual and the closest relationship you can imagine with Susan Gilbert. Now, Susan married Emily Dickinson's brother, Austin, and moved into the Everglades. The Evergreens, sorry. And so, yeah, that's great, right? That's wonderful. It's wonderful. Well, so Emily Dickinson at one point sent some of her poems to Thomas Wentworth Higginson. Sounds like a British name. He's drinking some scotch and some brandy. This is Thomas Wentworth. So, but he's not. He's just an American. But Thomas Wentworth Higginson was the contributing editor of the Atlantic Monthly. She sent him a letter, says, "Are you too deeply occupied to say if my verse is alive?" She knew very well it was alive. What did he do? Edit. He wanted to edit them. Gosh. And so she just took that very, 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 very hard. Then let's go on to the ultimates. Now, this is the publication history. Now, when she died, these fascicles, these groups, in an irony of ironies, this woman who was the wife of an astronomer at the university came to town, and she began an affair with Austin. So think about this. This is David Todd is the astronomer, and Mabel Loomis Todd is his wife. And Austin and Mabel Loomis Todd, the wife, was having an affair for a long, long time. And so this is the woman, because the first editor would be the literary conservator executor of Emily Dickinson's estate, died. Well, so what happened was Higginson, the guy from the Atlantic Monthly, and Mabel Todd are the ones that went into her bedroom and opened up the drawer, pulled out the fascicles, and published her poems and tore the fascicles to pieces. They were beautiful little, they were on white unlined paper, and they had like ribbons connecting them, binding them. And she really looked like she really obsessed about the groupings and the subject matter and the different books. Well, they ripped them apart. And the fascicles are lost to history. We don't know what they were like. They can never be reconstructed. But Higginson and Todd published her poetry. But guess what? They edited it. They edited out all of her beautiful dashes, all of her slant rhymes, made them formal rhymes, and so all of her angst about publication in the end came true. Yeah. So those iterations, those edits of her poetry lasted for a long time, until some scholars, I mean, relatively recently, things about the 1950s, decided, hey man, let's check out the original, let's check out those original manuscripts, and realized how heavily it was edited. And then they re-released her poetry, and people who'd loved her poetry forever got to see the real stuff. Now, if you're interested in the original manuscripts, check this out. You can go to the Emily Dickinson archive. This is an archive of, they're trying to get every single manuscript that she has, the originals. And if you click on one of these, I felt a funeral in my brain. Okay. And in any event, here's the manuscripts. This is Emily Dickinson Museum. Tons of great stuff here too. Lots of manuscripts, biographical stuff, just everything you can imagine. So if you're interested in these things, I promise this works. I've done a lot of it, but it'll show you the actual original manuscripts from many different places. Different archives is what they're trying to do. They're trying to bring all the archives together into one here in the edickinson.org, and there it is. Okay, you go to manuscripts by image. There you go. And in any event, I promise that's awesome. So then let's see what to say about her. Now, she wrote her poetry in a certain type of meter, and the meter is, sorry about that, the meter is called a 14er. The 14er is this. So it is an iambic pentameter, and it's the old meter of Bible verses, Bible hymns, ballads, nursery rhymes, things like this. And you can see it has 5 beats here, 1, 2, 3, I'm sorry, 4 here, and then 3 here, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, 3. And if you're interested, it goes to the sound of House of the Rising Sun. And that's very interesting. She writes it in such a formal, stressful meter so that she can break it, because she's such a nonconformist. It would be like putting a row of stop signs on her way home, just so she can blow through them and show you what a nonconformist she is. She breaks the meter with her dashes. She breaks the meter with caesuras, just a pause in a line of poetry, with her punctuation. She breaks it in many different ways. And she is one of the biggest proponents of the slant rhyme. And a slant rhyme is kind of a rhyme. And it really is, it takes more intelligence, I think, to write a slant rhyme than a natural rhyme. And if you'll notice here, right here, in this poem, much madness is divinest sense to the discerning eye, much sense the starkest madness, 'tis the majority. She would not want you to force that rhyme between I and majority. So she would want you, she wouldn't, so what she did to you here is she forced you, the reader, I know we talked about this on a previous day, she forced you, the reader, to make your choice, whether you're going to be in the majority, which I assume most people even then and now would say poems are supposed to rhyme, and this is I and majority. and you'd want to force it. Are you going to be in the majority, or are you going to have courage and jump outside of the majority and say majority rather than majority? This poem, I think, is amazing because it does everything Emerson did in volumes and volumes of nebulous, sometimes writing, in just a few lines. Much madness is divinest sense to a discerning eye. Much sense, the starkest madness. 'Tis the majority. In this, as all prevail. Assent, and you are sane. Demur, you're straightway dangerous and handled with a chain. And of course, chains, slavery, bondage, servitude. If you agree, society says you're sane. If you disagree, you're dangerous. If society comes to you and says you're crazy, take that as a badge of honor, because the craziest people of history did the most, right? Much sense is the starkest madness. If society comes to you and says, you make a lot of sense, you're probably not doing anything great. That's the majority. And this word majority is sort of like the nuclear explosion at the center of this poem. Yeah. Much madness is divinest sense.